If you have ever watched someone turn instantly hostile the moment the truth comes out, then you know how disorienting it is. One minute, you think maybe this conversation will finally bring clarity. Maybe now people will see what has been happening behind closed doors. Maybe now the lies, the double standards, the manipulation, the emotional cruelty will stop. But instead of accountability, what erupts is chaos. Rage, blame, denial, threats, smear campaigns, sudden emotional explosions that make everyone in the room forget what was actually exposed in the first place. And if you were the one standing there, seeing it unfold, you may still be carrying the shock of it. You may still be replaying the moment in your mind, wondering how a simple truth turned into a war. You may still be asking yourself why the reaction was so extreme, and why, somehow, you ended up feeling like the guilty one. If that happened to you, I want to begin here. You were not the problem. The truth was not the problem. What was exposed was the problem. And the reason the reaction was so intense is because exposure threatens the very structure a narcissistic person depends on to maintain control. What looks like an explosive fight is often not really about the secret itself. It is about what that secret was protecting. In a narcissistic dynamic, the image matters more than the reality. The appearance of innocence matters more than honesty. The performance of being misunderstood matters more than taking responsibility. So when someone exposes the hidden behavior, whether that is cheating, lying, emotional abuse, triangulation, financial control, cruelty, or a pattern of using people, it does not just reveal information. It breaks the mask. And for someone who relies on that mask to regulate their sense of power, that can feel intolerable. This is why the reaction can seem so out of proportion. You may think, if the truth is simple, why not just admit it and move on? Why not have a calm conversation? Why not explain? Why not repair the damage? But a narcissistic person often cannot tolerate being seen in a way that contradicts the image they need others to believe. They do not experience exposure as an opportunity for honesty. They experience it as humiliation, threat, and loss of control. And when a person is organized around control, anything that threatens that control can trigger a violent emotional response, even if no physical violence is involved. The fight becomes a strategy. It becomes a way to flood the environment with so much emotion, confusion, and fear that nobody can stay focused on what was actually revealed. That is one of the first things to understand. The explosion is often a diversion. Not always a conscious, carefully planned one in every moment, but still a diversion. If they can get everyone reacting to the outburst, defending themselves, calming them down, or arguing over tone, then the original issue starts to disappear. Suddenly, the conversation is not about the lie, the betrayal, or the abuse. Now, it is about how you embarrassed them, how someone attacked them, how unfair the timing was, how disrespectful people were, how everyone is against them, how they are the real victim. This shift happens so quickly that people often do not even notice it. They just feel overwhelmed. And overwhelm is useful to a manipulative person. Because when people are overwhelmed, they lose clarity. You may have noticed this in your own experience. Maybe the exposure happened in front of other people, and instead of addressing what they did, they exploded in a way that made the room tense and unstable. Maybe they started shouting, crying, accusing, threatening to leave, bringing up old, unrelated issues, attacking your character, or dragging in private details about you. Maybe they said you were cruel for exposing them. Maybe they acted shattered and wounded, as if they were the one who had been betrayed. And if you were already someone who tries to keep the peace, there is a good chance their reaction pulled you into exactly the role they needed from you. The one who starts backing down, explaining too much, softening the truth, or trying to make the situation calm again. This is where many people get trapped. They mistake intensity for sincerity. They think, if someone is reacting this strongly, maybe they really are hurt. Maybe I did go too far. Maybe I should have handled it differently. But strong emotion is not the same as truth. An outburst is not proof of innocence. A breakdown is not accountability. Tears are not always remorse. Sometimes they are a defense against exposure. Sometimes they are a way to make sure the focus returns to them. At the psychological level, what you are often seeing is narcissistic injury followed by narcissistic rage. Narcissistic injury happens when the person experiences something that cracks their inflated self-image. It may be criticism, rejection, public embarrassment, loss of admiration, or being exposed as dishonest or harmful. Because their identity is often built on external validation and fragile internal defenses, that injury can feel unbearable. It does not register as, "I made a mistake." It registers more like, "I am being annihilated." That does not excuse the behavior, but it helps explain why the response can be so extreme. The rage is an attempt to get rid of that intolerable feeling by pushing it outward. Instead of feeling shame, they create fear. Instead of sitting with truth, they attack the person who revealed it. Instead of facing consequences, they create a crisis. And the effect on you can be profound. Because exposure is supposed to bring relief, but in these dynamics, it often brings another layer of trauma. You finally tell the truth, and instead of feeling safer, you feel punished. You finally name what has been happening, and instead of being heard, you get buried under denial and retaliation. That can make you question your reality all over again. It can make you think that maybe silence would have been easier. Maybe keeping the peace was safer. Maybe telling the truth only makes things worse. But that is part of the trap. When a manipulative person trains everyone around them to fear their reaction becomes another form of control. A lot of people assume the darkest secrets are always dramatic or shocking. Sometimes they are. But often, the darkest secrets are patterns that were hidden in plain sight. The way they pit people against each other. The way they say one thing in public and another in private. The way they provoke emotional reactions and then act calm to make someone else look unstable. The way they gather sympathy from outsiders while being cruel to the people closest to them. The way they need admiration but resent other people's needs. The way they punish honesty, independence, and boundaries. These patterns may not always look obvious from the outside, but when someone names them clearly, the narcissistic person knows exactly what is being threatened. It is not just a secret, it is their system. That is why exposure often leads to escalation rather than resolution. They may launch a smear campaign to discredit the person who spoke up. They may recruit flying monkeys, people who take their side without knowing the full truth. They may rewrite history and claim you are unstable, jealous, abusive, dramatic, or obsessed. They may suddenly act generous, wounded, spiritual, or changed in order to regain sympathy. They may try to provoke you into reacting so they can point to your reaction as proof that you are the problem. All of this serves the same purpose: restore control, protect image, and avoid accountability. If you have been through this, it is important to understand how deeply it can affect your nervous system. These experiences are not just intellectually confusing, they are physically exhausting. Your body learns to brace. Your mind becomes hyper-alert. You start analyzing every text, every facial expression, every shift in tone. You replay conversations trying to prove what really happened. You keep hoping that if you explain it one more time, calmly enough, clearly enough, kindly enough, the truth will finally land. But the hard truth is this: people who are committed to protecting a false self are not listening for truth. They are listening for leverage. That realization is painful, but it is also freeing, because it changes the question. The question is no longer, how do I get them to understand what they did? The question becomes, how do I stop giving my peace to a person who uses confusion as power? That is the turning point. That is where clarity begins. Clarity does not always come in one dramatic moment. Often it comes quietly. It comes when you stop being hypnotized by the reaction and start looking at the pattern. It comes when you notice that every exposure becomes your fault. It comes when you see that every hard conversation gets redirected into chaos. It comes when you realize that honesty is only welcomed if it protects their image, and punished if it threatens it. It comes when you accept that the fight was never really about communication. It was about control. Once you see that, your emotional position starts to change. You stop trying so hard to prove your experience to someone committed to denying it. You stop confusing their volume with authority. You stop measuring truth by how confidently they distort it. You begin to understand that their anger does not define your reality. Their denial does not erase what happened. Their ability to perform innocence does not make them innocent. This is also where boundaries start to matter in a new way. Not as punishment, not as revenge, not as a dramatic announcement, but as a quiet refusal to keep participating in distortion. A boundary may look like ending a conversation the moment it turns manipulative. It may look like not defending yourself against false accusations in circles where the truth is not welcome. It may look like keeping your personal life private. It may look like documenting what happened instead of arguing about what happened. It may look like refusing to chase closure from someone who uses every conversation to reopen the wound. Calm detachment is one of the most powerful shifts you can make, because it removes the fuel. A narcissistic person often wants emotional access. They want to provoke, hook, confuse, and pull you back into proving, pleading, explaining, and defending. Detachment is not coldness. It is not denial. It is not pretending you do not care. It is caring enough about your peace to stop handing your inner life to someone who misuses it. It is saying, internally and sometimes externally, I see the pattern, and I am no longer available for it. That does not mean it is easy. If you were bonded through cycles of hope, pain, intermittent kindness, and emotional instability, your system may still crave resolution. You may still want them to admit what they did. You may still want others to see the truth. You may still feel angry that they seem to move through life protected by image while you carry the aftermath. Those feelings are real. They deserve compassion. But healing begins when you stop waiting for the person who harmed you to become the one who restores you. You restore you by trusting what you saw. By respecting the part of yourself that knew something was wrong even when the environment kept denying it. By recognizing that confusion was not proof that you were weak. It was often the result of being in a system built to keep you off balance. By understanding that your exhaustion was not failure, it was the natural cost of trying to survive emotional contradiction for too long. And slowly, you begin to return to yourself. You start speaking more simply. You stop over-explaining. You notice when guilt is being used to pull you out of your center. You stop needing everyone to agree with your story in order for it to be real. You protect your energy more carefully. You choose relationships where truth does not cause punishment. You learn the difference between healthy conflict and manipulative escalation. Healthy conflict may be painful, but it still leaves room for honesty, responsibility, repair, and mutual reality. Manipulative conflict leaves you confused, blamed, drained, and somehow responsible for the damage someone else caused. That distinction matters, because once you have lived through these dynamics, your sense of normal can get distorted. You may think intensity means connection. You may think being constantly on edge is love. You may think having to earn basic respect is normal. It is not. Love does not require you to abandon your reality. Respect does not demand your silence. Real connection does not collapse the moment truth enters the room. So, if an explosive fight erupted after someone exposed the narcissist's darkest secrets, do not judge the truth by the noise that followed. Judge it by the pattern it revealed. Ask yourself what the reaction was protecting. Ask yourself who was forced into silence, confusion, or self-doubt. Ask yourself whether the explosion led to accountability, or whether it only created more fear and distortion. Those questions will tell you far more than the performance ever will. And if you were the one who spoke up, or the one who finally saw what was happening, I want to remind you of something important. Seeing clearly can feel lonely at first, especially when the other person is skilled at image management, especially when other people only see the version of them that was designed to be seen. But clarity is still a form of freedom, even if it is uncomfortable, even if it costs you the fantasy, even if it forces you to grieve who you hoped they were. Truth may not give you the ending you wanted, but it gives you the chance to stop living inside confusion. That is where peace begins. Not when they finally admit it, not when everyone else understands, not when the story gets wrapped up perfectly. Peace begins when you stop arguing with what your own experience has already shown you. It begins when you release the need to manage someone else's instability. It begins when you choose self-respect over access, truth over image, and calm over chaos. You do not have to match their intensity to reclaim your power. You do not have to expose more, explain more, or fight harder. Sometimes your power is in stepping back, in refusing the bait, in becoming less available to manipulation, in building a life where your nervous system is not constantly bracing for emotional impact, in learning that peace is not boring. It is safety. It is dignity. It is the return of your own mind. And healing is possible, not because what happened was small, but because you are no longer asking chaos to become clarity. You are no longer asking distortion to become truth. You are no longer waiting inside the same cycle for a different outcome. You are allowed to move forward informed, wiser, and more protective of your inner life. You are allowed to let the explosion be information. You are allowed to let the truth stand, even if someone else keeps trying to bury it under noise. In time, what once felt shocking becomes obvious.